Welcome! You are listening to the CRM Success Show, where you will hear from CRM executives who have overseen some of the most interesting and complex CRM implementations. Your hosts, David Mosry and Kiro Whitey, will be bringing you real stories, real insight. Follow along on social media for updates on new episode releases, exclusive content, and much more. Enjoy the show and thanks for listening.
Welcome to the CRM Success Show. Today we're talking with Peter Schweiss, Director of Technology Services at Hope Ignites. So welcome, Pete.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Good to see you again, Peter. I know we first got to meet in person. December, Chicago World Tour. It was freezing, if I remember correctly.
Yes, indeed.
But thanks for joining us. So Peter, just tell our listeners a little bit about your background for us, nice and easy.
Yeah, sure. So I started here at Hope Ignites about almost 7 years ago. Before that, I had a somewhat interesting career. I grew up around technology. Out of high school, I worked in restaurants, managed restaurants. I have a formal degree in culinary arts. Kind of pivoted back into technology when I started having kids. And here I am today. So I've been at Hope Ignites for about 7 years. Started in a somewhat of a support role, and then went through 2 promotions now to where I sit today as the Director of Technology Services.
I don't know if you want to go a little bit further back, Pete, but you had an interesting journey into tech, let's say, because that wasn't you're in the restaurant hospitality space.
Correct.
And then you got your break that way. Quickly tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I was working in restaurants, like I said, for a while, and when I wanted to break back into tech, I went to work for a hospitality technology company here in St. Louis. I knew the owners. They worked with a lot of our restaurants, and my role there was I was an implementation person, but largely what I did, because I understood both restaurant world kind of in this tech world, I was able to bridge a lot of gaps between understanding how restaurants operate and what owners and chefs were looking for, and how to manifest that into technology. So that was kind of my my safe segue back in, if you will, my staying comfortable, but also kind of bridging back into technology.
It's very smart to leverage industry and where your passion, interest, and also knowledge is, right? As a quick segue into tech or Salesforce, I think a lot of people overlook that. Very cool. So you did the installation piece, which was like your toast systems and your restaurant. What do they call it?
Point of sale.
Point of sale. There you go. Fantastic. And then how do you get into this role? How do you go about getting the role at Hope Ignites?
Yeah, so about 7 years ago, prior to working here, I had been a volunteer for a number of years. I served on the associate board of directors for one of our affiliates. My mom was an employee at one of our affiliates for a while, so I had lots of exposure to Hope Ignites. Back then we were Boys Hope, Girls Hope. So I'd always been involved in one way or another. And as they were kind of growing and figuring out their next steps, they opened this support role that I started in. And I messaged the VP that was over that department at the time and said, "Hey, love to have a conversation. Maybe I know some people that you could talk to." And then turns out that I fit the role. So I started, a couple of weeks after that, and the rest is history. This was 2019. So this was midnight 2019, June-ish timeframe, before the pandemic. So the role I started in, mid 2019, by early 2020, it was a completely different role, than what I started with.
You want to share how so?
Sure. So like many organizations, for-profit, nonprofit alike, we flipped to working from home, handling processes digitally, meeting in Teams, Zoom, Google, whatever your flavor was. And a lot of my role quickly pivoted from supporting the platforms and the functions we had into this kind of initially a more reaction based, like, here's today's problem. How are we gonna, adapt this process? And once we kind of got over that hump and realized that we were starting to look at what could be new normal in some aspect, we were able to get strategic at that point and really start thinking through decisions, less to rise to immediate needs or whatever, and more to like, we have this new paradigm. We've invested in platforms. Turns out those platforms are really helpful in general. We could definitely start making some strategic decisions with those that were kind of parallel to the pandemic, that were more focused on org growth and less on, rising to meet the needs of our new normal.
Perfect. So Hope Ignites. Tell us a little bit about Hope Ignites. We know they're a non-profit, as you've shared, and we know you got your foray into the role through the board director, voluntary type stuff. So that's fantastic. I know people work in the space because they want to give back and don't necessarily go into it thinking they might get something out of it. But in your case, it was a whole new career. So that's fantastic. What do Hope Ignites do? What is their mission? What is their purpose, and how do they help individuals?
Yeah, so we were founded here in St. Louis back in 1977, originally as a residential program, and the goal was to take young people that were motivated, that had talent and gifts, but didn't necessarily have the opportunity to act on those talents and gifts. And we brought them originally to solely into residential settings. So we had homes here in St. Louis. These young people come into our homes. They would go to schools in the area. We would bring in tutors, all that kind of stuff. I'm really focusing on bringing structure and resources in. And this was just in St. Louis at the time. But our founder, Father Paul Sheridan, kind of knew right away, once it worked, that it could work at scale. And so I think very quickly we started to look at what's next, where can we go? And we expanded across the United States and to several other countries. Right now we operate in the United States, Mexico, and Guatemala. And we split, gosh, I wish I knew what year it was. We split into kind of two pathways at some point. We kept the residential setting for those individuals that really needed that level of programming. We also split off into this academy pathway, or this kind of after school pathway. All the same academic support, all the same resources, just in an after school format, not in a purely residential format. So that's kind of how we exist today. We changed, as I mentioned in the beginning, we were Boys Hope, Girls Hope for a number of years. About a year or so ago now, we changed names to Hope Ignites, and we continue to grow today. Our current goal by 2035 is to triple our impacts. We want to triple the number of young people we're serving through our programs. And with that comes a lot of fun, but very meaningful strategic work to get there.
And that, by tripling in size, that would be roughly how many extra scholars that you'd be supporting on an annual basis?
So we support about 1,300 young people today. And I'm terrible at math, so you can't see me with my calculator here. Close to 4,000 young people would be the goal. Obviously, yep. Rough numbers, right? But yeah, right now it's about 1,300 young people a year, so the goal would be to triple that.
Amazing. Well, fingers crossed you get there.
Yeah,
we'll be supporting you from the sidelines. Or if we can help, let us know. But so in terms of your role, Peter, it's a broad role. It's not just limited to Salesforce, but obviously we do want to cover a little bit how Hope Ignites at a high level leverage Salesforce. So just give us an idea what products are you using, how many users, and then also second follow-up question to that is, what other areas outside of Salesforce are you responsible for under your role as Director of Technology?
Yeah, so we use Salesforce for a number of things. We came from Razor's Edge back in the mid 2000s when MPSP first really kind of started gaining momentum. And at that time, Razor's Edge was our fundraising database, and Salesforce was a one-to-one replacement of that. That predates my time here as a team member, but I was part of that on the volunteer side back then. So initially, Salesforce, like many orgs, was focused on fundraising, and that's what we did. But then the VP of Ops at the time kind of saw potential in Salesforce because for any of us that are in the ecosystem
So
know. Go ahead.
they migrated away from Razor's Edge to Salesforce.
Yes.
How was that? I haven't done a Razor's Edge migration in years. It's been a long time since I put it.
I can't speak to how well it went because I wasn't here when it happened. But what I do know that we learned from that migration, and we're still learning from this decision today, is when you pull in from Razor's Edge or any platform, we made the decision to pull in fundraising data going back to the beginning of the database, and it ended up being far too much information. And it proved to not be as functional as we had thought. So in the way Razor's Edge sorted information versus the way Salesforce sorted it, there was a lot to be learned there. One key thing about how we function in Razor's Edge was we have 14 affiliates. At the time, I think we had 16. But you would have a John Smith at 5 different affiliates. It's a different John Smith in every city. In Razor's Edge, that would have been 5 contacts. In Salesforce, that's 1 contact with 5 relationships. And mapping that out and getting all of that pulled together was kind of a unique to us situation because of our affiliate model. But definitely some things that, I wouldn't say the migration went poorly. There's just always that hindsight, right? Afterwards of the data decision that felt good and seemed right. And then when you see it, it's like, oh, well, could have gone a different direction on that one.
So you're saying you had 5 different Razor's Edge systems? Why are there 5 John Smith?
We have one Razor's Edge platform, but the way Razor's Edge sorted donors, if I had 5 people, unique individuals, all named John Smith, in Razor's Edge, I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. One single individual, one human being, John Smith, but he supports 5 of our affiliates.
Mm-hmm.
He'd have 5 contacts in Razor's Edge. In Salesforce, he has 1 that gets shared amongst, all of our affiliates. And kind of mapping that data model into Salesforce was tricky for us. And we're still deduping.
Yeah, the matching. Matching could be tricky.
Yeah.
I don't remember that about Razor's Edge, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I do want to talk about nonprofit treatment is this week. This week meaning the week we're recording, not the week it's airing. So
Right.
Unfortunately, my understanding is you're going to be speaking there in the coming days. The Power of Intentional Design, I believe, is the title. There's no spoilers here because this will air after your
That's
speech,
right.
so no problems here. So let's tell us a little bit about that. What is intentional design and why is it so powerful?
Yeah. So for us, it's actually a unique story to some extent. When I started, a lot of our platforms, whether it was Microsoft, Salesforce, this or that, they were all kind of that vanilla branding, off the shelf, Microsoft logo, Salesforce logo, all that. And we were talking about user adoption and kind of, is that valuable? How do you drive user adoption? How do you, what are the elements of that? It's very easy to go to training. It's very easy to go to, there's lots of metrics for user adoption that people tend to gravitate towards. But I talked to our marketing team and we kind of looked at, we had a very robust brand as an organization, very thoughtfully created, lots of assets, lots of use cases, lots of design there. And it's a very vibrant, blues and oranges. It was a very vibrant color set. So I started to do some research kind of on how do we bring that brand into our internal systems. We did a great job of branding externally, Facebook posts, website, email signature, all that stuff. Our forward facing brand was solid, but internally everything was very vanilla basic off the shelf, which is fine, right? The platforms functioned. It didn't impact the ability to do the work. But it didn't feel like it was ours either, right? It just felt like we bought a platform and put it out there. And there's an interesting statistic that kind of ties this all together to some extent. It's 71% of media and entertainment spend, so movies, video, anything like that, among diverse groups is driven by whether the content feels like it was made for them. Kind of that influencer sort of vibe, right? And that obviously applies to social media influencing, all that stuff. But the key there was feeling like it was made for them, kind of that sense of I belong with this content. And I kind of took that and said, well, I think internally it makes a lot of sense that as a mission-driven organization, our platforms, everything our employees touch should feel like it was built for them, built for us. It should be our platform. Salesforce being very customizable, the old adage, if you've seen one Salesforce org, you've seen one Salesforce org. I kind of took that and said, let's make this all look like it's ours. Let's make it, feel built for us. And at the time, I didn't think much of it, but our marketing team was like, man, this is great. It looks, it feels, it speaks the mission. And we saw a steady increase in adoption. I can't say it was 100% tied to that because we did a lot of other feature improvements as well. But people refer to it, instead of calling it Salesforce, we call it Hopeforce. We've really kind of made it our own. And that seemed to resonate with people in a really positive way.
So do you think it's because it's just getting your user base to more identify with the mission? Or is it just making the system more usable, more friendly, more approachable? Like, why do you think this worked?
I think it's both. I think that it becomes more approachable because it just fits into everything else that we do. And beyond just colors and logos, we were very, very intentional about help text, field labels, descriptions, being very mission driven, using the language that resonates with us. We don't call our participants kids, we call them young people or scholars. Our employees, or we refer to them as team members. So all the belonging that goes with that came out in everything we did. So I think it really was both. I think it was feeling like it was built for them, and also just feeling like I'm not entering data into a black hole. I'm entering into this platform that connects to our scholars, that connects to our funding sources, that connects to everything that we do. It just built that core comfort in the platform.
So do you feel that do you feel the impact is because of that comfort level in the platform, or again, it's just realigning with the mission? I think that's the
Yeah.
So yeah.
I think the adoption came. I think the other thing to back up a tick is we're talking about our user base, primarily social workers, right? Roughly 60% of our users are social workers. They're not sitting in an office. They're not, particularly, you're not in front of a computer 6 hours a day. So to connect with them and to make the platforms meaningful to them meant that they had to support their ability to work with young people. They don't want to spend 3 hours entering reports, logging interactions. They want to do it quickly and they want to move on. And I think by building it in a way that functionally supported that grounded it in that intentional design beyond just look and feel. Again, intentional in when you click this screen, this comes up. When you're collecting data here, here's what we're collecting. I think all of that really played a huge part in it. And well-developed training. I mean, SOPs that are written in our language that aren't written in, it's not a user manual, right? It's talking about things in the context of how we operate.
And then again, tying back to the mission. So So, can you give us like another one or two examples of things? Because user adoption is a massive um,
Sure.
topic in the CRM space, and a lot of firms really, really struggle with it, as you can imagine. Um, so, if this is another trick in your toolbox to
Yeah.
help, right, to help user adoption, it's definitely not a common one. Most people, the most they do is maybe change a logon screen and put a logo in
Right.
the upper left-hand corner, and then that's about it.
Yeah, and I think, and I'll be transparent. No,
Yeah.
we don't have perfect user adoption. I've yet to meet someone in this ecosystem who can tout perfect user adoption, and the day I meet them, it'll be a miracle. Um, but I think the other thing that we did beyond, so this was the core, right?
Mhm.
Let's build the login, let's build the UI experience so it screams Hope Ignites. But then we focused a lot, and this is through lots of user feedback, town hall meetings, listening tours, sitting next to people, show me how you do your work. We also make sure that our training programs are getting robust. We certainly have a lot of training resources. We have handbooks. But the other key to user adoption for us was making sure that we have guidance embedded in the platforms. So you don't have to go to SharePoint to find the how-to article on how to do this thing in Hopeforce. It's right there. When you go to that scholars page, there's resources there that say, here's the steps for this, here's the steps for that. And we did it in an unintrusive way. So if you know what you're doing and you don't need the guidance, boom, just get in the platform and do it. If it's a more episodic task, you're a new team member, etc., the guidance is sitting right there for you to take advantage of without having to search for it. This was kind of pre-AI, right? Our long-term goal will be a little chatbot that sits there that knows where you are and can guide you through the process, or agent. I shouldn't say chatbot. Agent's the new term. But yeah, something like that would be an end goal. But this predates a lot of that technology being, mainstream.
Yeah, we're gonna end up with Clippy.
Right? Clippy was
I
good,
swear
man.
we're so going in that direction. It's just a matter of time. Um, so tell me about SOP. So SOPs, for those who don't know, or listeners, standard operating procedures. So you got, I guess, help within the screens themselves, probably tooltips
Yeah.
and other things directly on the screen. Links to the SOPs directly from the screen?
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. And then what do you mean when you say, like, they're really written in a mission-driven way? Like, what does that mean
So we
practically?
use
What does that mean?
we use a platform called Scribe for most of our SOPs. It's if you haven't used it, it's a little capture tool, runs in your browser. You literally like click through the process. It captures screenshots, kind of discerns what's going on, creates your documentation. Then you can go back, edit it, annotate, all that kind of stuff. But the key thing is, because we were very intentional on field language, on labels, on look and feel, when Scribe goes to make our SOPs, based on our actions, it's pulling in this mission driven language already, right? It's already, we're already there. It's already built to be mission driven. So when you pull up the Scribe, it looks and feels exactly like our application, because that's what it was built off. And I will admit, and my supervisors will back me on this, I am not always great at simplifying technical instructions. Um, Insert AI, where I can just say, hey, take these tech instructions and make them simple. But we do a lot of work around peer reviewing documentation, making sure that different levels of tech understanding can ingest our documentation and make something of it. And those are embedded in every workflow. Every workflow we have, whether it's Salesforce, if it's in SharePoint, wherever it is, those SOPs are embedded right there.
You want to give us an example of like a standard flow?
Yeah. So one of our more complex ones is our scholar intake process. So if we get a referral to the program, they come into our purpose-built case management tool as a referral. There's a life cycle involved, in everything from you become a referral, then you're an applicant, then you're in introductory period. There's all these different stages and different steps that go along with that. There's assessments we complete. There's, do you fit the program, all that kind of stuff. And all that data is collected through what we call the PPM, or our program participant management app, which is a Salesforce experience cloud site that serves as case management for us. So for every one of those transitions, every one of those actions a user has to take, there's a supporting SOP. We have, one big document that has them all in it, but then bite-sized ones peppered throughout, the different UIs and whatnot. And our support team has access to all that same documentation. So if a new team member chimes in and says, hey, still learning how to do this, we have bite-sized, documentation. We can say, great, happy to walk you through it. Here's some links, here's some resources to guide that. So the other cool thing about Scribe that I focus a lot on, I was at Dreamforce, I don't know, 3 years ago maybe, and I attended a session about ADA and about accessibility and about technology that's made for everyone. And one of the things that I took away from that, beyond color, contrast ratio, all that basic ADA stuff, is this, everyone consumes and learns differently. And the way we design our SOPs, you can read it on a piece of paper, click through the steps, you can make a little video out of it. There's so many different ways to deliver that. And I think that's another key to that adoption success, is that you can consume the content however you want, and it's right there for you.
So to be completely honest, I've read like the standard ADA stuff, and it's like said you should make your website, ADA. What it stands for, like accessible.
It's Americans with Disabilities Act. I forget.
Yeah, something like
Yeah.
that. And it's like you got to use color schemes that are friendly to colorblind people, and
Right.
it's got to like speak if you want to, and then giant texts. Like how do you keep something pretty and like when you're talking about intentional design and like
Yeah.
a pleasure to use, and when you're trying to cover every single handicapped out there.
Sure. Well, Salesforce does a great job of enabling that. All your field descriptions, all that stuff that maybe some of us, maybe myself, don't always fill out. All the way Salesforce handles screen readers and all that stuff, it drives off all that metadata that's already in your org. So as long as you build fields with help text, with descriptions, you can keep the UI clean for anyone who wants to consume it, as it's built. If you use an adaptive tool like a screen reader or something like that, all that metadata is in there. The screen reader takes advantage of that information. It can read it out to you. You can change the contrast of, there's tools in the browser that change the contrast if you have, a vision accommodation, something along those lines. So the nice thing is Salesforce allows us to both keep the standard UI, but also have adaptable options kind of baked under the hood. But the key thing about that is, screen readers adapt, alt text, all that stuff is easy. The reason why color scheme matters so much is if you have a vision accommodation and you go in and trigger a high contrast version of your Salesforce org, all it's doing is flipping the contrast ratio of the colors that are in your org. So if your colors don't match the ADA suggestions on aspect ratio and whatnot, when that adaptive tool adjusts the view for that single user, it's going to create a poor experience for them because the colors just aren't compatible. So making sure that you take all of that into account And the crazy thing in this session I was at Dreamforce, the guy that was talking said, I'll admit, out of 400 users, I have one user that uses all these capabilities that I'm putting in there. But he's like, the cool thing was we thought about it from the get-go. So when that one user came along, instead of adjusting Salesforce to work for them, they were able to say, hey, we're ready for you. The org is set up, turn your screen reader on, whatever you need, it's all there. And it's a small piece to a big puzzle, but for that one person, it made all the difference in belonging and inclusivity and being able to be a part of that organization without major accommodation.
We've talked a little bit about making the most of helping nonprofits make the most of Salesforce. We know from speaking to you before and just in general, the nonprofit space is a very collaborative, inclusive community within itself. A lot of nonprofits will actively go out there and help one another. What's working for us, what isn't. I want to ask a flip question to that question. And look at, in your opinion, where do you think nonprofits get it wrong when it comes to Salesforce? And maybe if you're able to, I'm sure Hope Ignite's journey wasn't always like that. Were there anything in particular when it came to Salesforce that perhaps you guys didn't get right at the first time of asking, which obviously you fixed and rectified, but curious on that front?
Yeah. So we have a couple learn from our mistake stories. I think the biggest one was we're in our second Salesforce org. We deployed our initial iteration of Salesforce using some managed packages, using some different ways to utilize the data inside Salesforce. And the primary focus was on reducing license costs. We were using portal managed packages to try and ingest data, work with data without having to purchase a bunch of platform licenses, largely driven around budget and the fact that nonprofits by nature have to be cost
frugal.
Yeah, frugal, scrappy. I like to call us scrappy, right? We find those solutions that sit in the middle. I think what we learned from that is there's value. You don't want to overspend. We don't want to waste money. But there's value in spending money well and making investments that do make an impact. So we ended up flipping to a more at the time they were communities, now it's digital experiences. We flipped into a more Experience Cloud focused deployment, and we really went all in on buying the right licenses and deploying the right technology. So saving money was great, but it kind of ended up costing us, in the long run. So we deployed a brand new org, migrated our data, brought in a new partner, and kind of, redid all of that. So I think making the right investments is key. I was on a podcast a couple of weeks ago where we talked about, the cost of Salesforce goes far beyond paying the bill to Salesforce. It's not just about buying your licenses. It's your partner. It's your managed packages. It's investing in your team, whether that's professional development, scaling up your team, all that kind of stuff. You have to make the right investments, and it will cost. Not investing in the platform will end up costing you more in the long run than it is just to make the right investments the first time. And it's hard to know what those are. We failed. We had to redeploy. We had to change course, but we're much better because of it. So it's okay to fail, to make mistakes, right? As long as you get back up and, and learn from it and keep pressing forward.
So today's org, how big is that, and what products within the Salesforce suite are you using? Any additional managed packages that you have included within that as well?
Yeah, so we have about 300 or so employees across the US and Latin America. Between 150 and 170 of those employees interact with Salesforce through a license, whether that's platform or community. And that's all pretty standard stuff. MPSP is our package we're using. We're obviously evaluating Agentforce, nonprofits, MPC, that kind of thing. But right now, MPSP is what drives a lot of our fundraising, kind of that core functionality. As I mentioned, we leverage digital experiences for a lot of those more purpose-built functions. Our HRIS platform is completely baked into Salesforce. Our case management platform, the entire technology team runs inside Salesforce, from asset management to case management and knowledge management, all of that. And that's all leveraging, for the most part, native features to the platform, add-on packages here and there, but largely native features. We just recently moved all of our event pages, donation pages, fundraising to they were Classy, now it's GoFundMe Pro. And that's been a great success for us. It's really leveled up what we could do with fundraising. We were using custom built visual force pages for fundraising, and it was great up until the point, but when you want to take it to the next level, you had to go back and rebuild visual force, and there's limitations there in look and feel and whatnot. And then a couple other plugins. I mean, obviously we have our backup, we have a DevOps tool, all that kind of stuff. We use a tool called Form Assembly to do a lot of our data collection. So of those 300 or so employees, the ones that don't directly interact with Salesforce day in and day out via a license, they're either feeding data in using Form Assembly, or interacting with that content via Form Assembly. And those are really roles where it's their jobs don't really revolve around the data that's there, and we can get away with using that tool to pull data in.
And then in terms of to kind of wrap up this topic, power of intentional design. I'm curious. I want to know, like, where did it stem from, the idea, and then also you shared with us in the podcast brief something you're working on GitHub, which people can access as well.
Yeah.
Do you want to just tell us a bit more about those two areas?
Yeah. So my co-presenter in Charlotte later this week is a good friend of mine, Allie Marin. We're colleagues here. She's our brand and design manager. And the other half of intentional design was, I had the vision to use our branding internally and kind of and maximize that. But it also became a partnership with her and the marketing team of, whenever something we built came out, they were confident it was well built, it was designed, it was going to look great. And that partnership really became fruitful in a lot of ways. We collaborate a ton now on aesthetic, on a lot of different things, and share feedback back and forth. And what that built in and of itself was this culture of functioning across teams and collaborating and really respecting the work each other do, and the value in, what tweaking a hex code by 10% makes all the difference. And your average tech director may not value that or care about that, but once you see it and you can see the impact those individuals have, it's night and day. So it went way beyond, for me, it went way beyond just, look and feel, into this kind of building this partnership together. And then every project we do with the marketing team, whether it's public websites, this or that, there's this fruitful relationship now that, we trust each other, and we can collaborate and do great things, all because we put some intentionality down and really, focused on working together.
So basically, you put together
yeah,
and we're going to share the link when your podcast
right.
airs, but basically you put together a framework that others can kind of basically copy and paste and implement into their org around some of the branding pieces we've spoken about.
Yeah. So on GitHub, there'll be a whole repo full of a roadmap, essentially, of, low impact, medium impact, high impact, and kind of how to think through all of that. It's part tech and kind of click here, click there, etc. And the other half of it is kind of leading that intentional design conversation of, before you go pick a color in your Salesforce org, think about this, think about that. And there'll be lots of other resources on there on sample image sizes, all the stuff we did. And the goal is just it's all configuration based. We're not talking about Apex, Visual Force, LWCs, anything like that. We're talking about go into setup and, and do these things, these minimum things, and make a difference in how your folks see your org.
Yeah, love it. All right, well, thanks for that, and thanks for putting that together. We'll make sure that people who would like access to that can have access to that. So we always like to talk a little bit about, especially with individuals that are fast-tracked into director level roles pretty quick, like you have. We always like to ask and spend a little bit of time talking about how exactly you achieved that. So one of the things that we see is there are two types of people, right? One is those that just get there from grinding away over years and years and years of experience, 15, 20 years, etc. And the opportunity kind of fell in the lap and they excelled. Maybe that wasn't always their career path, but when the opportunity came, they took it, and the rest is history, right? The other type of leader we speak to is somebody that knew from the get-go, this is what I want, and this is how I'm going to go about getting it and achieving it, and being a bit more, I don't want to say aggressive, that's maybe the wrong word, but being very proactive about making sure they get it, right? I would like to know which side of the fence, if any, you sat on, because you've gone from kind of being an individual contributor to director leading a team, not just Salesforce, but all these different other initiatives in 6 years, 5 years, maybe even a bit less, as you've had that title for a while. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure.
Where was your experience, and kind of what side of the fence did you sit?
Yeah, I was somewhere in between those two fences. Even going back to my restaurant career, I never really cared. I was never someone who got hung up on title. I was always just very focused on, let's get it done. If the goal is, to rock through a dinner service or deploy a new application or build a brand, whatever it is, let's do it, and let's bring the right people in to do it and kind of and keep that moving. And I think that naturally lended itself into leadership roles because I had the attitude of just, let's get it done. And if someone needs to be in charge, then I'll be in charge. And if we got to if we got to go find the right people, then I'll go find the right people. Let's build the team. Let's do the work. And as I kind of alluded to also, like coming into the role I came into and then having to pivot into the pandemic response allowed me to be strategic in a way that I don't think I would have had the pandemic never happened. Because it went from support to having to be strategic and be innovative pretty much overnight, right? We got the call, take your laptops home, get the food out of your desk drawer, like we're done. So that allowed me to kind of push that vision forward and be a leader and be strategic because we had to respond, and it was going to be my department that did it. So that's kind of how that grew, almost, like by necessity. But then again, I've always kind of had that knack to lead. I like to be on the innovative side of work. My boss, who we have a fantastic relationship, often has to remind me that new and exciting things are cool, but there's some mundane stuff we got to keep doing. So there's some growth and humility in that leadership, but that was kind of how it manifested.
In terms of the humility aspect, right? So I know today about 60% of your time is spent supporting and extending the Salesforce org. The other 40% is on these other areas that we've touched on earlier on in the intro. Was there perhaps one thing that you overlooked when it came to management that you thought shouldn't be as hard as it is, but it was? And also, I know your team expands globally as well. So, what was one thing you overlooked?
I think, you know, gosh, there's a lot of things I overlooked.
Well, tell us. It doesn't have to be just one. Then you tell us a couple.
You know, I think when I first started, I kind of assumed that everyone was on board. The job I was doing, you know, it was kind of, again, in that pandemic era, it became very essential very quickly. And I think out of I didn't have to prove a lot of worth because we were solving problems at lightning speed. So the value was there. I think coming out of that and into our world now, I spent a lot more time around planning and being thoughtful on these deployments and building these plans that maybe beforehand I would have, you know, executed and asked questions later. So that thoughtfulness, and then I think the other thing that the current org chart at our organization supports today is I'm an executor. I'm a doer. I can jump into a situation and jam through it with little guidance, little, you know, we'll figure it out. Um, and my boss and really less honestly, I mean, she supervises me, but really we've been working together for so long. It's really just more of a lateral working relationship. But she has to rein me in sometimes, you know, and it's perfect because when I've gotten too far in the wrong direction, she can politely steer me back, knowing that I had the right intentions, but I went off in the wrong direction, you know, went off too far in the wrong direction. I think ha- having the humility to accept that and to also say like, hey, why am I not doing? Why is what I'm doing not working? Why is this user frustrated? Why is this platform not being adopted? Why are these people confused? Having the humility to say, I'm not the smartest person in the room by a long shot, but tell me what I'm doing wrong, or tell me what you observe I could try differently. I think that's just a key to leadership, is that you're not going to get it right. You're not going to get it right 10% of the time, right? But soliciting that feedback and striving to do better every time is the only way you're gonna grow from that.
Couple of quick questions, Pete. First is, what benefits have you seen directly by expanding your responsibilities beyond Salesforce?
The biggest benefit is it's a blessing and a curse to oversee so many platforms, because I don't have three different departments: a CRM department, a Microsoft department, a Cisco department. I don't have that. They all come through me, which can be a lot. But the blessing is I can also make very quick decisions on integrating those platforms together. I think because of where I sit, we ended up with a much more integrated technology ecosystem than other orgs may have, because everything runs and collaborates through me and my team. Things like user provisioning, you know, data flow between Microsoft and Salesforce, all these things that you have to have knowledge and alignment on both sides of the table for. For me, it's all one table. You know, it's all for better or for worse. It all sits with me.
For an individual contributor who maybe is like a senior admin, CRM support, RevOps, you know, go-to-market consultant, whatever it might be, the title. But let's say they're in a similar org setting, 2 to 3 to 400 users. What would be your bit of advice to them who are thinking, man, I would love to get into management, and I've hinted at it to leadership, and you know, they said they'll have to create a role, and it's maybe not got anywhere. It's maybe they feel like their career's plateaued a little bit, but they want to move into management. What would be one bit of advice you would give those guys and girls?
You know, leader said to me a long time ago, be irreplaceable. Approach your role in a way that makes you unique. Find something you're good at. Find something you can contribute to that intrinsically changes the work you're doing. be seen, but in a humble way. This isn't a brag. This isn't a, rent a billboard. This is solve a problem, meet a user where they are, and really just show that value. And it goes a long way to show value and show worth versus asking for responsibility, asking for, a title, a role, whatever. A well-run organization will see that value. I mean, sometimes you got to get it in front of the right people,
Yep.
But, as a hiring manager, when I look to hire people, I don't look at a resume and say, great, you've been a director for 12 years at 5 organizations. I want to know, what did you do? How did you change that organization? What makes you unique? And how did you get to that role? Or if you're coming to us, why do you want to grow? How what motivates you to grow? I think those are the key things to remember. Is people care far less about what you put on a resume and far more about what you can demonstrate.
So, pivoting back, you had a restaurant previously. How would you compare running a restaurant to running a technology group, in terms of even dealing with employees or dealing with customers as opposed to user base? Yeah, give us the highlights and
Um,
lowlights.
Restaurants are controlled chaos on a good day. The most well-run restaurant in the world is controlled chaos, and technology can be that controlled chaos, in a very similar way. At a restaurant, you might have people calling in sick, a pot of soup burning, a dishwasher that's broken, a sink. You're gonna have all these outside influences, but in technology, you're gonna have all those same. This platform went down. This, AWS is out now. Half our ecosystem's not talking. It's all controlled chaos, and it's just about being able to prioritize and be able to respond quickly to the highest priority item, and kind of orchestrating that chaos in a way that people feel confident that, yeah, Salesforce isn't working right now, but it's okay because Pete and his team, they know it's not working, and they're gonna make it work again. I think that was what I learned most from hospitality was that keeping things moving, keeping people confident, and that customer service aspect of, like, I think, when I was bartending, you saw people on their best day, on their worst day, on a regular day. When you're talking about working with users in this service focused jobs, it's the same thing. It could be your worst, that end user's worst day, and they can't get something to work, and they're calling in, they're coming in frustrated, or they could be having a great day, and knowing how to adapt to that, and make sure that you don't belittle the user, you comfort them, and build that confidence. Very, very lots of segues, much more than I would have thought. If you'd have told me 15 years ago that I would compare running restaurants to running technology teams, and they would have so many parallels, I would never have thought that, but definitely true.
Yeah, yeah, tell us about I wouldn't say parallels, but the skills that would carried over.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and like really helped you. So what in the restaurant business made you, let's say, a great director?
There's a role in the restaurant. There's the guy or gal that stands at the head of the kitchen and is the person in between the food coming out of the kitchen and the servers that are taking it to the table. And in that role, you have to know what's going on all around you. You have to know how long it takes that steak to cook, and that steak is coming with a salad and this and that. There's all these components that all have to work together. Because at the end of the day, when you want that plate to go out, everything should be hot. Nothing should be overcooked. It should all be right. And that requires orchestration to make sure that all those pieces come together. And at the time, to me, we call it expediting. That was the role. You were the expediter. You got the food out. But what that really was project management, right? It was 12 times. If you have 12 orders hanging up there, you're managing 12 projects, and you have individual contributors. You have all these different pieces coming together, And your job is to make sure that everyone knows what they're supposed to do, when they're supposed to do it, and how those dependencies come together to form that plate of food, that experience for the guest in the restaurant. It's the same, when you look at when I think about tickets and I think about, the mini projects that come in, the user experience stuff, it's all the same thing. It's all project management on a macro or a micro scale. But it all goes back to knowing where your people are and make sure they know how to bring it all together. Very, very, there are days where I could close my eyes and pretend like I'm standing at the restaurant again and orchestrate, the happenings of the day.
Cool. Well, I could think of many more examples. I would love to go into those customers that don't tip or say their food is cold and who they relate to in a Salesforce org. But that's a conversation for another time. Talking of time, I'm conscious of time. So what's next for you, Pete, in terms of conferences, any other speaking gigs lined up, any other cool initiatives you're working on in terms of Salesforce?
Yeah.
16 hours.
So besides Nonprofit Dreamin' later this week, I'll be at Dreamin' in Data in Chicago in May. And that presentation is all about, the title is Rent the Brain, Hire the Heart. It's about evaluating and finding that balance between a Salesforce partner and hiring, internal team members and kind of finding that balance. I'll be at AIM, in Baltimore in March, I think, talking about SOP development and kind of how well thought out SOPs can motivate your technology team. And that's all I know for now. I'm sure there'll be more, but for now, that's what I got for speaking. And then in terms of initiatives, we're all trying to wrap our heads around AI and kind of how will AI, whether it's Agentforce or Copilot, how will that be a part of our future? I think there's no question it's going to be a part of our future. Technology is the key to growth in this space. So figuring out the data strategy behind it, all of that's, I think, our biggest project. And that sits on multiple planes, and there's tons of mini projects kind of all baked in there.
Just interesting, I guess it's a small word factoid. One of our previous guests, who I think just aired this morning, Susie, is running Dreaming in Data or Data Dreaming in Chicago. So
yeah,
you can meet up with her there.
Susie's actually a really, really good friend of mine. We text almost daily, and we met at a conference years ago and have been fast friends. So,
oh. Awesome. Yeah, I actually think Susie recommend you for this podcast?
Yeah.
Yeah, Kara and I met in Chicago on that blustery cold whatever it was, December. I forget what month it was.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah. So we'll keep an eye out for your sessions. Will you be at Dreamforce this year? Is that on the cards for you?
Probably not Dreamforce this year. Maybe next year, but we'll see. I never never know until we get there.
Very true. You might get a last minute free ticket or something.
That's right.
That might change things. So one of the things that I happened to stumble across on your LinkedIn post, I just want to give it 30 seconds. You've got a fundraising initiative for Hope Ignites. It's a walk to hope. Just tell us about that. And again, we'll include the link. Both myself and Maz are gonna put something there from the podcast, from the CRM Success Show. But if others would like to get involved, what is that in aid of? Where does money go? How can they support?
So it's one of our only network-wide fundraisers, and it's a virtual step challenge. So through the month of May, you'll pay to register, kind of like a 5K, and there's an app from Charity Miles. You log activity, running, walking, cycling, and the goal is just to log as many miles as you can. There's kind of prizes along the way for most miles, most dollars, that kind of thing. But the goal is, it started in the pandemic when we couldn't have in-person fundraisers. We want to have a virtual walk around the network. So it's become a very fun fundraiser. And my goal, as an employee, I created the Trailblazers for Hope. So I'm trying to get all my Salesforce friends and other friends, right? Anyone who's willing to support us, to join the Trailblazers for Hope team and see if we can be a top fundraising team for Walk to Hope. So if you're interested in participating, walktohope.org is the link, and we'll get it in the,
We will indeed. We will indeed. Thanks for that. And I think that's a good note to end on. So we'd just like to say thanks, Pete, for your time. We massively appreciate that. It was great to learn a bit more about you, Hope Ignites, and some of the interest areas that are close and dear to your heart as well. Keep up good work. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a pleasure to chat.